Hi all, in this video we're going to see the special features of renal blood flow. So this again has been asked in many university exams as a short essay question. So we'll see what the special features of the blood flow to the kidneys. So I've enumerated around 6 special features. So I'll just explain the concept first and then we'll see each one by one. So we know that the blood flow to the kidneys is primarily via the renal artery. And one important characteristic is that the amount of blood that is flowing to the kidney, when you take a percentage of the cardiac output, is around 20 to 25 percentage, which means a huge amount of blood actually reaches the kidney per minute. Okay, but even though the huge amount of blood reaches, the arteriovenous difference is actually very less, which means the kidney is taking very less oxygen from this arterial supply, or in other words, because the blood flows more than what the kidney needs, the difference between the artery and venous oxygen is very less. The only oxygen, the basic need for oxygen for the kidneys is for sodium reabsorption. So it's only if the sodium reabsorption is less, obviously the amount of oxygen that the kidney takes is also going to be less. Another important point is because the renal artery is a direct branch of the abdominal aorta, its hydrostatic pressure is very high. So these are the first three important characteristics. One is it has an enormous blood flow. Second, the arterial venous difference in oxygen is less. And third, it has got a high hydrostatic pressure. Now we know that it is from this the renal artery branches and finally it forms the afferent arteriole, which then forms the efferent arteriole. So usually we know that an arteriole actually breaks down to capillaries, which then breaks down to venules. But in this case the afferent arteriole is breaking down to another arteriole, which means it's something like a portal system. So that is another unique characteristic of the renal blood flow. The efferent arteriole then form branches forming the peritubular capillaries as well as the vasa recta, especially in juxtamedullary nephrons. Now the blood flow in the vasa recta is very slow. Why? We'll see the reasons in detail, but that's again an important feature. So even the huge amount of blood at a high pressure is reaching the kidneys, the blood flow in the vasa recta is very slow. Okay, and finally the kidney has got its own auto-regulatory mechanisms to regulate the amount of blood that is actually reaching the nephrons. So it has a, even if the blood pressure of the body is changing, the renal blood flow and as well as the glomerular filtration rate is maintained strictly within a normal range, and that is possible because of auto-regulation. So these are the next 3 points, that is it's got a portal system, decreased blood flow in the vasa recta, and also autoregulation. So now we'll see more points about each one of them. Okay. So first, as I said, it's got an enormous volume of blood flow reaching through the renal artery. So as I said, around 20 to 25% of the cardiac output reaches the kidney, which is around 1200 ml per minute. Okay, and so if we are considering it per unit tissue, around 400 ml per 100 gram is reaching the kidneys, which is very high. Now this is to ensure that there is efficient excretory and regulatory function by the kidneys. Actually that much blood is reaching so that the amount of waste can be removed quickly. Okay, next, as we said, there is low oxygen extraction, or the AV difference is very less. So oxygen extraction is the difference between arterial and venous oxygen content, and the kidneys consumes twice oxygen of that of brain, but because it has 7 times more blood flow, the oxygen difference is very less. So basically the oxygen delivery is much more than that of metabolic needs, and therefore there is low AV oxygen difference. And as I said, the oxygen that it needs is basically for sodium reabsorption. Okay, so suppose we're going to draw a graph between the sodium reabsorption and the amount of oxygen consumption. We can see that is going to be a graph like this. That means as the sodium reabsorption increase, oxygen consumption also increases. That is why we say if there is no sodium reabsorption, the oxygen would be decreased to almost 1/4 the normal, or it will just need the basal oxygen consumption. So it is just the residual, this basal oxygen consumption alone is needed for the basic metabolic needs. Rest all is for the sodium reabsorption. The third point, as I said, is that the renal artery has got a high hydrostatic capillary pressure because it's a direct branch of the abdominal aorta. But so what? What if it has a high hydrostatic pressure? Well, it ensures that it's got a high glomerular capillary hydrostatic pressure. So what? Because it facilitates filtration. So see, suppose this is the diagram showing the afferent and the efferent arteriole, and here this is the afferent and efferent, this is the glomerulus, and this is the Bowman's capsule. So as I said, when the amount of, because it's a direct branch of abdominal aorta, it's got a high capillary pressure, high hydroglomerular capillary hydrostatic pressure, which means the pressure which is present inside the glomerulus will be very, very high. Now, what is the characteristic of hydrostatic pressures? It will push the fluid out, right? So, because the hydrostatic pressure is more, it is going to push the fluid into the Bowman space, which means there is going to be a good glomerular filtration rate. So, that is the relationship between hydrostatic pressure and filtration. So, because you have a high hydrostatic pressure, you're going to have a high amount of GFR, or glomerular filtration rate. Okay. Now, next point, as I said, we've got a portal system. We've got a structural similarity to the portal system because the afferent arterioles break down to the glomerular capillaries, which then break down to the efferent arteriole, which actually resembles a portal circulation. And this, in fact, is good because it allows a reabsorption of filtrate contents before final excretion. So that is the regarding the portal circulation. Next point is that there's a differential flow of blood. As I said, there is decreased flow in the vasa recta, whereas here the blood flow is normal. That means in the cortex the blood flow is normal, but in the medulla the blood flow is slow. So you've got a differential distribution of blood flow. So in fact, we know that around 90% of the blood reaches the cortical nephrons. It's already the number of nephrons in the cortex is more. So about 90% of the blood is going to the cortical nephrons. So there is high glomerular pressure which favors filtration. But the medullary blood flow is low, and that is basically because of the increased vascular resistance. Now, why is there an increased vascular resistance? That is because, see, you've got these huge veins of the vasa recta, and these are long vessels, so the velocity of blood flow here is less. And not only that, because the efferent arteriole diameter is low, so naturally the hydrostatic pressure, the pressure with which the blood is being pushed, is also very slow. So in the medulla, basically the velocity of blood flow will be less when compared to the cortex. Okay. So now this helps to maintain the medullary concentration gradient. That is, it helps in urine concentration. So we know that the cortical nephrons are basically for filtration. So there we need good hydrostatic capillary pressure. But the medullary nephrons are basically the medullary blood flows for urine concentration. So there we need a blood flow which is slow, and its main role is to maintain the medullary concentration gradient. So that is why we have a differential distribution of blood within the same organ. And finally, our last point, as I said, is that we've got an autoregulation. So even if the BP is between 80 to 180 millimeters of mercury, the kidney blood flow remains constant. The GFR also remains constant. And that is mainly because we've got two mechanisms called the myogenic mechanism and the tubular glomerular feedback mechanism, which helps to maintain that renal blood flow as well as glomerular filtration rate. I've explained autoregulation separately in another video, so if you see that, you'll understand this concept more. But then as a short note, I think you just have to mention it. You don't have to explain the whole thing in autoregulation here, because here the question is special features of renal blood flow. So thus we've seen the important 6 unique features of the renal blood flow, and I hope you remember the diagram with which I explained the 6 points, the first 3 with one diagram and the next 3 with another. It will be useful to remember these points if you remember those diagrams. So I hope this video was useful for you. Thank you.